Now, WSAV News 3 on Your Side presents another chapter in our award-winning series, Honoring Black History. Presented by Attorney Ken Nugent.
Thank you for joining us for WSAV's Honoring Black History Special. I'm Kim Gusby. Tonight, we take a look at the people and places that have played a significant role in shaping our community. We begin with a valuable resource that's been sharing Savannah's African American experience for nearly 150 years, a pioneering paper that has played a critical role in journalism since its inception in the late 19th century. In the early days, newspapers were the backbone of the black community, providing essential information to freed slaves in search of a better life, highlighting both the struggles and successes often left out of mainstream media. Locally, the Savannah Tribune has provided a voice for more than 145 years. Originally called the Colored Tribune, the publication was established shortly after the Civil War, when the black press emerged in the South.
When you go back to the Savannah Tribune, it was founded and established in 1875. Now think about that. That's right after emancipation, during the period of Reconstruction. And John DeVoe and William Pleasant and Louis B. Toomer Sr. Were businessmen, and they established the Savannah Tribune.
Its purpose, as printed in its first issue, to defend the rights of colored people and their elevation to the highest plane of citizenship.
When you think about that period of time, it was difficult, but they were the ones that had the messages out in the black community, and they kept everyone in that community apprised of what was going on.
With the end of Reconstruction in 1871, many black publications folded, but the Tribune survived until 1878.
And there was a period in time, probably around it was about almost a 10-year period, that the Tribune ceased to be published simply because the white publishers in the area refused to print the paper.
It reopened in 1886. In the early 1900s, under the guidance of Saul C. Johnson, the Tribune served as South Georgia and North Florida's only means for news about the injustices of the Jim Crow era. Prominent Harlem Renaissance writer James Weldon Johnson even served as a correspondent for the paper in the 1920s, during his time as executive secretary of the NAACP. In 1954, Willa Ayers Johnson succeeded Saul C. Johnson to become the first female owner. And in 1960, the paper again temporarily closed its doors. But after a 13-year hiatus, banker Robert James reestablished the Tribune, serving as owner and publisher until his wife Shirley, a counselor by profession, took the reins in 1983.
As publisher, I still had, my professional position at Savannah State University, which really took the majority of my time between doing that and being a working mom. So we've always had just very good staff members at the Savannah Tribune who really, they are the ones that I have to give the credit to for making sure that we never missed a publication date. Never. 1973, even during the period of time when we had the fire in 2006, which was devastating.
Today, as many newspapers struggle to stay afloat, the Tribune has pressed on, persistent in its role to provide a platform for people of color, because representation matters.
African American newspapers throughout the country have always been the ones that would bring truth to the matter as far as the African American community was concerned and is still concerned.
In addition to being the owner and publisher of the Savannah Tribune, Shirley James is also the chair of the Savannah Black Heritage Festival. Mrs. James is quite the history maker herself. You can see more of her story on our website at wsav.com/blackhistory. From print to film, a local history maker now has a bigger platform. A documentary on Savannah Reverend Benny R. Mitchell Jr. is streaming on Amazon Prime. WSAV Now reporter John Dowding spoke with his son about sharing his father's legacy with the world.
We should hail and support the gospel and and the philosophy of Dr. King.
Nearly a decade after his death, Reverend Benny R. Mitchell Jr.'s lessons on giving back to the community can be heard on Amazon Prime.
If some people were interested in going into law, politics, being a doctor, he had a philosophy where once you make it to a certain level, always reach back and bring somebody up with you.
His son, Benny R. Mitchell III, says divine inspiration motivated him to put together a documentary about his father's contributions to Savannah, a project that was 10 years in the making.
I felt that I would regret this for the rest of my life if I did not attempt to do it. And it was something that was very strong.
Since the film first premiered, he learned his father's story was one of many other untold stories of leaders who fought for change.
And it's amazing how many people are opening up to me about these untold stories because they feel like I can give them a voice.
Mitchell says one of his biggest takeaways is how his father's lessons continue to speak on issues we face today.
One thing that he believed in was community. And you can't have a community without people, and those people have to be on at least one accord.
The Mitchell family also oversees the Benny R. Mitchell Jr. Institute, which works to provide scholarships for students and information on Reverend Mitchell's legacy. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
WSAV Honoring Black History is brought to you by attorney Ken Nugent.
A son of Savannah has broken a big barrier in the United States Senate. When Reverend Raphael Warnock took the oath of office in January, he became the first African-American senator from the state of Georgia. WSAV News 3's Ben Singer recently asked the senator to reflect on his historic win.
And you cannot tell the American story in full without reference to people of African descent. And I'm grateful just to be a part of that story. And we need all of our voices and the vision and perspective that comes from various backgrounds to make real the promises of our democracy. And I think that's what this month is really about. It reminds us of the ways in which we're all tied together.
You know, as we've seen the increase in social justice, especially these past few years, the movement, more white people have gotten involved in that. And I think there's been a bigger conversation about, what can white people be doing at this time to bring that social justice change? So what is your message to them?
I think what we need is people in their own spheres of influence to stand up for bigotry, stand up against bigotry, no matter where it rears its ugly head. It is a virus that mutates, and if we're not careful, it infects you, and if it doesn't infect you, it certainly affects you.
We interviewed several of your friends and former neighbors and folks that have known you from your time in Savannah. And, they said on your behalf, he will make us proud. He will do right by coastal Georgia. And obviously, when you talk about the economic piece, even outside of the pandemic, we have great disparities here. We have, people who have lived in generational crippling poverty. What can you say to those folks? What help can be on the way? What is your vision for how you fix that problem?
I'm going to be focused on the kinds of things that give children like the child I was growing up in the housing projects in Savannah a chance. And so one of the things you will see me stand up and fight for over the next few days and weeks is the earned income tax credit and the child tax credit. We literally have an opportunity to lift American children out of poverty, to cut child poverty in half. And we can do that this year.
Senator Warnock grew up in Caton Homes here in Savannah. He attended Saul C. Johnson High School, Savannah State's Upward Bound program, and Morehouse College. Reverend Warnock is also the senior pastor of the famed Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, where Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. co-pastored with his father. The hostess city is full of history makers. Sometimes we just have to open our eyes to see their accomplishments. Take, for example, Dr. J. Alfonso Dandy, a pioneer in the city's medical community. News 3's Edward Moody takes a closer look.
Savannah was never the plan for Dr. J. Alfonso Dandy. Back in 1972, it was a stop on his way to set up practice in Daytona Beach.
And I stopped to visit some friends of mine, and they asked me, had I ever thought about practicing in Savannah?
Dandy and his wife wound up staying. He became the city's first black eye doctor. Around 1975, he made history again.
I was the first black doctor to practice on the south side of Victory Drive.
He says he was not welcome. White residents broke out his windows, spray painted the N-word on his building, and every morning, dog waste was covering his parking lot.
And it was strategic because there would be dog droppings right in front of the doors.
Dandy didn't run, and eventually the harassment stopped. He credits perseverance and daily prayer.
And I would get on my knees and pray and ask God to guide me that day.
In 2004, the doctor lost his sight, forcing him to close his practice.
And I boo-hoo cried because I really enjoyed practicing. I enjoyed my patients.
But Dandy was soon back at work, founding Antioch Foot and Ankle Group. But he felt he should be doing more.
One night I was lying in bed and I decided, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to open up a youth center.
He opened Dandy Youth Development in his old office building in 2015. He's teaching black boys how to be leaders and to avoid the lure of gun violence.
And to love one another. And if they manifest that type of love, then they're less apt to get a gun to shoot somebody.
Most of the money to run Dandy Youth Development comes from Dr. Dandy himself. To learn how you can donate, visit our website, wsav.com/Black History. We'll be back right after this.
WSAV Honoring Black History is brought to you by attorney Ken Nugent.
Welcome back. Black women have been breaking down barriers and shattering stereotypes in all aspects of life, even in the fight to keep history itself alive. Tonight, Ashley Williams takes a look at the life of a local preservationist who helped turn the page for progress by saving pieces of the past.
This boarded up abandoned property on West 36th Street doesn't look like much of a museum in its current state. But Deborah Johnson Simon has made it her mission to help secure a future for the deteriorating site of the former Kaya House Museum. The founder of the African Diaspora Museology Institute has worked since 2014 to save the property, one of the first black museums in Savannah.
My organization, ADMI, is interested in telling the stories of black museums wherever they exist, and those individuals who are a part of this black museum movement.
The historic house was built in 1910. In 1959, Savannah State professor Dr. Calvin Kaya and his wife Virginia converted their home into a museum. The location was listed as one of the Reader's Digest Treasures of America in 1974. As an artist, it was Virginia Kaya's lifelong dream to open a museum that would appeal to everyone.
She called it a museum for the masses.
But today, the former museum is a far cry from what it once was. After Virginia Kaya died in 2001, the house was left in probate and left to deteriorate.
There was a big lighter there, and clothes in the fountain, and homeless signs out there where we see that people are using it for their own purposes.
The museum's current state leaves it vulnerable to demolition, but Johnson Simon and others are working to prevent it. The Georgia Trust for Historic Preservation added the house to its 2021 Places in Peril list.
This is a special program through the Georgia Trust where they help groups and individuals who are trying to save, history and culture like what we're trying to do here.
That status helps raise awareness for the endangered Kaya House. Johnson Simon's latest fundraising efforts have already raised over $4,500.
It puts us in the eyes of people who can be of assistance to us to help us make a difference with this.
A national conversation continues about renaming monuments and symbols that celebrate the Confederacy. Locally, one group is asking the city of Savannah to change the names of two well-known squares that rest on slave burial grounds and were named after slave owners. WSAV News 3's Ricardo Lewis explains the group's fight for recognition.
If these trees could talk, they would be a witness to what happened here hundreds of years ago.
And as an African American, this is a painful story, and it pains me to even be here at this square.
That's because Calhoun and Whitfield squares rest on slave burial grounds.
This was the slave cemetery area, and so we don't want to have a sacredness of a Negro burial ground, to have pro-slavery advocates like John C. Calhoun and Reverend George Whitfield named in our local squares.
Pat Gunn and Rosalind Rouse with the Center of Jubilee are asking the city of Savannah to consider changing the names of these historic sites and placing historical markers. They say it will help those who visit to understand the city's true history.
And I personally don't want any public spaces where taxpayers are spending their money to have something that is causing pain to another group.
Calhoun Square would be renamed to Sankofa Square. It's an African word that means go back and fetch it. Whitfield Square would be changed to Jubilee Square after Jubilee Freedom Day.
How would you like to be in a position where your relatives are buried, and on top of your relatives is someone that really didn't care about you as a human being? Ashe-o, ashe-o, ashe-o.
Gunn believes this is a season of deconstructing and revising history to heal the opened wounds.
These are sacred places and spaces where our ancestors dwell without a marker. My conscience will not allow us to rest.
The Center of Jubilee will have to get at least 51% of the neighbors in the area to agree to the name changes. Welcome back. We closed with a piece we first brought you back in 2017. A group of unsuspecting girls at the heartbeat of the movement for change. Tonight, we revisit their story, one that was hidden for more than half a century in the tiny southwest Georgia town of Americus. It's a story that warrants national attention, but until recently has remained untold. A story Dr. Shirley Green Reese has kept inside for more than 52 years.
And this is where we stayed for 2 months.
Reese was one of 15 girls thrown into prison during the summer of 1963. She was only 14 years old, the others ranging in age from 12 to 15.
We didn't know each other during the time we was here. We was from different parts of the city.
Their crime? They marched to protest a segregated movie theater in Americus, a tiny town just north of Albany.
Honey, they arrested all of us. And I got in too. Nobody ran, and that was the beginning of our life.
Though they were never charged, the girls were arrested and transported to Dawson, some 30 miles away.
Early the next morning, they took these young girls, including myself, and put us in a paddy wagon and brought us to this site right here, which is another 25 miles away from our home.
For 2.5 months, they were held captive in this old stockade in Leesburg.
We was put into this place with no beds, broken glasses, dirty place, no commode, no shower or anything. Just a big, dirty place. And we had no food for weeks.
And no connection to the outside world.
How did that make you feel? Deserted. Deserted from our city. And the worst part about it, we was children. And another part about it, we was young girls, black girls, who was trying to make a difference, who was trying to support the mission of Martin Luther King. Because we wanted equality. You know, we got tired of going in the back doors. We got tired of not being served. We got tired of going, you know, we wanted to go to the front door because we wanted equal rights. We wanted justice.
But justice was slow going. Here they would remain until mid-September. Their release, not because of public outcry, protest, or policy, but because of a picture.
And there was no NAACP representative who came to these doors. There was no local officials, political officials. They did not come here. The only persons we saw down at this stockade the entire time was Danny Lyon and our parents.
Danny Lyon was a movement photographer for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, or SNCC, when he heard rumors about the jailed girls.
They would send him out to different parts of Georgia to take pictures of what was going on in Albany, Georgia, because it was just as bad there. So they found somehow somebody told them about the girls that were sleeping on filthy whole floors or something in Leesburg, Georgia. And they sent Danny Lyons to Leesburg, Georgia to find us.
His shocking images would lead to their release.
After taking the pictures, Danny Lyons indicated to me that he took the pictures back to Atlanta to a bathroom where they had a sneak office in Atlanta with John Lewis and those, and he developed those pictures right there. After developing those pictures, he sent them to Harrison Williams. He was a United States senator who was very connected with the civil rights movement. He sent those pictures to him in Washington, D.C. He presented those pictures to whatever Congress meeting he was in, and they sent an order down to Leesburg, Georgia to release those girls. That's the only way we got out.
They returned to school and to life without a word of where they'd been. Too painful to relive, many took the experience to their grave.
The stockade girl women are something else, aren't they?
But in April of 2015, Dr. Reese and the 8 other survivors spoke publicly for the first time during a commemorative program in Americus, with hopes of bringing closure, peace, and perhaps the possibility that their legacy will long be remembered.
We're not hostile. We're just trying to tell a story that needs to be told that was hidden 53 years ago.
Dr. Reese has a local connection. She graduated from Savannah State. 2 years ago, a historical marker was dedicated, recognizing the Leesburg Stockade and the girls held there in 1963. Thank you for joining us as we continue to celebrate Black history, not only during the month of February, but 365 days of the year. After all, Black history is American history. For WSAV, I'm Kim Gusby.